Hello, AHA students, it's Mrs. Poe. We are here today to read Mr. Peabody's Apples, written by Madonna. In the town of Happyville, which wasn't a very big town, Mr. Peabody was congratulating his Little League team on a great game. They had not won, but no one really cared because they had such a good time playing. Mr. Peabody was a history teacher at the local elementary school. And in the summertime, he dedicated every Saturday to organizing baseball games with other schools. Billy Little, who wasn't a very big boy, was one of Mr. Peabody's students. He loved baseball more than anything, and he thought Mr. Peabody was the greatest. After each game, he would always stay and help pick up all the bats and all the balls. And when they were finished, Mr. Peabody would smile and say, "Thanks, Billy. Good job. I will see you next Saturday." Then he would start to walk home along the main street of Happyville, which wasn't a very big street, waving hello to everyone he knew, and everyone would wave hello back. And along the way, he always passed Mr. Funkadeli's fruit market. Here, Mr. Peabody would stop and admire Mr. Funkadeli's fresh apples. He would pick out the shiniest apple, drop it in his bag, and continue on his way. Across the street, Tommy Tittlebottom watched him with curiosity as Mr. Peabody walked away with an apple. "That's strange," Tommy said to himself. "Mr. Peabody didn't pay anyone for the apple." Tommy got on his skateboard and rushed to tell all of his friends. The following Saturday, Mr. Peabody's team played another game, and they lost, as usual, but no one even seemed to care because they had such a great time playing, and Billy picked up the balls and bats, and Mr. Peabody set off on his walk home. He waved to everyone he knew, and they waved back. Once again, he stopped outside Mr. Funkadeli's fruit market, picked up the shiniest apple, and dropped it in his bag and continued on his way. Across the street, Tommy Tittlebottom and his friends watched Mr. Peabody as they were amazed at what they saw. Mr. Peabody had not paid for the apple. They couldn't wait to tell all their friends, who told their parents, who told their neighbors, and told their friends in the town of Happyville, which wasn't a very big town. The Saturday after that, Mr. Peabody was standing all alone on the baseball field, wondering where everybody was. Then he saw Billy walking toward him with a sad look on his face. "Hello, Billy. I'm glad you're here. But where is the rest of the team?" asked Mr. Peabody. Billy remained silent. "What is it, Billy?" he asked again. Billy didn't look up. "Everybody thinks you're a thief," he said to the ground. Mr. Peabody looked confused. He took off his hat and he scratched his head. "Who says I'm a thief, Billy? And what did I steal?" he said. "Tommy Tittlebottom and his friends said they saw you take an apple from Mr. Funkadeli's fruit market twice, and they said you didn't pay for them," Billy said. "Ah," said Mr. Peabody, putting his hat back on his head. "Let's go and talk to Mr. Funkadeli about it, shall we?" "Everybody thinks you're a thief." They walked down the main street, which wasn't a very big street, and Mr. Peabody waved to all the people he knew, and now some of them didn't wave back, and some of them pretended that they didn't even see him. And they finally arrived at Mr. Funkadeli's fruit market. Out popped Mr. Funkadeli, who said, "Hey, what are you doing here, Mr. Peabody? Why aren't you at the game?" "There wasn't a game today," said Mr. Peabody, "and I was wondering if I could take my apple earlier than usual. "Sure, why not?" replied Mr. Funkadelic. "You pay for them every Saturday morning when you pick up your milk. You can take them whenever you like. You want the big shiny one, Mr. Peabody?" Mr. Peabody took the apple, smiled, and offered it to Billy. "I would like to take the apple," Mr. Peabody said, "but I have to go and find Tommy and explain everything," said Billy. "When you find them, ask them to come over to my house. I would like to speak to him too," replied Mr. Peabody. A little while longer, Billy found Tommy and told him what had happened with the apples. He told Tommy that Mr. Peabody wanted to speak to him right away. So off Tommy ran, and when he arrived, he rang the doorbell, and Mr. Peabody came to the door. They looked at each other for a while. "Oh dear, Mr. Peabody," said Tommy at the doorstep. "I didn't understand. I shouldn't have said what I said, but it looked like you hadn't paid for the apples." Mr. Peabody's eyebrows went up a little, and he felt a warm breeze blow across his face. "It doesn't matter what it looked like. What matters is the truth." Tommy looked down at his shoes and said, "I'm so sorry. What can I do to make things better now?" Mr. Peabody took a big breath, looked up at the small cloud that was in the sky and said, "I'll tell you what, Tommy. Meet me at the baseball diamond in an hour and bring a pillow stuffed with feathers." "Okay," said Tommy, and off he ran to his house to get a pillow. An hour later, Tommy met Mr. Peabody on the pitcher's mound. "Hello, Tommy," said Mr. Peabody. "Follow me and bring your pillow." Tommy followed Mr. Peabody to the top of the bleachers, wondering what this was all about. "It's a windy day, isn't it?" said Mr. Peabody. When they reached to the top, Tommy nodded his head in agreement. "Here is a pair of scissors. Now cut the pillow in half and shake the feathers out." Tommy looked confused, but did it anyway. He thought it was a small price to pay to gain Mr. Peabody's forgiveness. The wind carried the thousands of feathers far and wide. It says the wind carried the feathers far and wide on this illustration. Okay, Tommy looked relieved and said, "Is that all I have to do to make things better?" "There's one more thing," said Mr. Peabody. "Now you must go and pick up all the feathers." Tommy frowned. "I don't think it's possible to pick up all the feathers," Tommy replied. It would be just as impossible to undo the damage that has been done by spreading that rumor that I'm a thief," said Mr. Peabody. "Each feather represents one person in Happyville." There was a big, long pause as Tommy began to understand what Mr. Peabody was saying. Finally, he said, "I guess I have a lot of work ahead of me." Mr. Peabody smiled and said, "Indeed you do. Next time, don't be so quick to judge a person, and remember the power of your words." And then he handed Tommy a shiny red apple and made his way home. And here's our last page with the end. And now you know what Mr. Peabody's apples is all about. And you can see him here with his pillow and all the feathers scattering. The end.